Hello, I'm Dr. Pierre Samaan, Director of New Horizons Institute of Counseling. Great to have you back with us once again as we talk about your life, my life, everybody's life, how to help things be a little easier through faith-based counseling. Our office is a counseling ministry. It's actually a ministry of United Brethren in Christ Church. We are a mission office for Christian counseling, and we offer counseling through donation basis. We don't turn anybody away. We help all that we can. Those who can afford to give donations, it helps us to see those who can't. Today, as the last time, we're talking about anxiety. So this is video number 2 about anxiety. Look at the previous video and you'll hear Linda's story, my wife, about her journey with anxiety, panic attack, and agoraphobia. Great help in helping each other. When you talk with others about your experiences and helping them, don't be afraid to. And listen to others, because you can always learn something new. Today we're going to go into some basics about the origins of anxiety. And to do that, we really need to talk about the brain, because that's where it's coming from. It's not coming from the heart, it's not coming from the lungs. As long as you have had your medical checkup and the physician has ruled out any other biological reasons, well, it just brings it right back to the origin. And it helps to understand, and most people that I've worked with over 30 years of Christian counseling tell me that with anxiety, it helps them a great deal to understand those dynamics. So we're going to start with some of the basics, and we're not going to get into all the details. You've heard a lot of details. You can go to any video and hear many of the same things over and over again. Most of you know very well the symptoms and all of that with anxiety. And if you need any help in becoming a little more familiar with it, you can do a search on your computers or email me, and I'm happy to answer your questions. In fact, I would like you to email me if you do have questions. It's healing@newhorizons.org, and you can see that on the screen. Our website is newhorizonscounseling.org, and the email is healing@newhorizonscounseling.org. If you're not sure about something and you'd like to know, it's okay. Just send me a little note on the email. I'll be happy to reply. As we go through this, you'll be able to see on the screen some of the pictures and the words that I have down. And in this way, you can always go back to it later, because I'm going to go through it fairly quickly on the screen so as not to take up too much of your time. I know when I watch YouTube at night, oftentimes I look at those timestamps on there and say, well, I don't know if I have that much time to watch something. So we're hoping that you'll have time to watch this segment and each segment that we'll have on this subject. When you look at the brain, basically the limbic system of the brain is where our emotional center is. It's located in the center bottom portion of the brain. And that limbic system really contains the fear center of the brain. And it sends messages out to all the other parts of the brain. But this is the center that is most important when we talk about anxiety. This is that area that is working a little too hard. And in some cases, it's a little out of control. And we're going to get into a video next time talking about a primary source for most people's anxiety. As far as I'm concerned, I don't know that they have studies to really indicate that primary source. They kind of break it down into 3 or 4 different sources. But the years that I've been working with this, the years that I've gone through it with my wife as we worked on helping her through her anxiety, I've come to some thoughts that are accurate as far as my experiences are concerned. Each of us have our own experiences, but from my observations of clients and my personal experiences with Linda, some of the conclusions I've come to seem to indicate that most of the time anxiety's origin is often during pregnancy. And I'm going to be explaining that next time. So you'll want to tune back in and hopefully get some more information regarding that. And there's some new research, recent research, that's backing that up. The chief responsibility for the limbic system is survival. That's that system that has that fight or flight area. It's that system that gives us the drive to know whether we need to fight or run. And so it also has to contain some memory bits of what's threatening, those things that we should be afraid of, or those things we should be cautious of. This part of the brain will hold some of those memories, and the 2 major parts, and there's several different parts, but the 2 major parts of the limbic system is the amygdala and the hippocampus. The amygdala, probably the most important regarding anxiety, because when the amygdala is overfiring, when it's cycling, it has trouble controlling itself. And when that occurs, especially if there's been a lot of previous stress, then it takes a while for it to cycle down. And as it cycles down, you get calmer, but we'll be talking a little more about that later. So the amygdala and the hippocampus sends those messages throughout the brain. The primary role of the amygdala is that alarm system. It's what sends that alarm, that fire alarm, you might say, to get you alert. I often give the example because I grew up in Daytona Beach, Florida, and when you're walking the trails or you're near a big lake or something like that, you want to keep your eyes open in Florida for alligators and whatever else. But those alligators, mostly they're scared of you, but they can be scary just looking at one. And you're walking in the sidewalk, especially at night, and there's an alligator, or there's a snake, and what do? How do you know that's dangerous? Well, you know it's dangerous because you've previously experienced information letting you know that could be dangerous or threatening. Previous information that's stored in the amygdala, in the limbic system, bits of that information to let you know, hey, I'm looking back in my encyclopedia of my limbic system, and there's an experience there, something you saw on TV, something you heard about, or something you personally experienced, to let you know that's dangerous. And so then immediately that amygdala kicks in. And when it kicks in, there's fear, anxiety, even aggression that can come from that. And I guess I should mention this, that a lot of angry people have anxiety and don't even know it. It's the anxiety welling up inside, but they've never identified it as that. They've identified it as something else. And the anger comes up, getting that adrenaline going, and they say things or do things to release that adrenaline, to release that energy. And of course, usually it's always somebody else's fault. But still, a lot of times it's anxiety welling up. And so when I deal with those that have anger issues, oftentimes we look at that and see, oh, where's this coming from? And that it can be very helpful to identify that. And mostly that's men. I've noticed that men, it's very hard for a man. I'm a man, very hard to admit any silliness about you or anything you're not in control of, because we're kind of control freaks, I guess, at times. Well, we're not going to admit, oh, I must be anxious. I must be nervous. I must have something I don't understand that's making me feel so uncomfortable. Instead, this rush occurs and immediately the anger gets vented. But when they take the time to recognize that and work on it, it helps a great deal. So the amygdala's primary role is processing of memory, decision-making, and emotional responses. And so when the amygdala helps you to recognize that snake or alligator on the sidewalk could be dangerous, well, then it decides what to do. And it pulls information also from other areas of the brain, but primarily those little bits of memory are already in there. And the amygdala decides where each memory should be stored in the brain and in the hippocampus. And that hippocampus sends the memory out to the rest of the brain. So the different parts of the brain then receive other bits of information. The placement is said to be determined by the level of emotional response that it receives. So obviously it depends on what you're afraid of, but a little spider, a little creepy thing, an insect across the sidewalk, not very scary, so it's not very intense, so there's not a big reaction. An alligator, a snake, yeah, that's intense. There's going to be a greater emotional reaction, so it leaves a greater imprint in the brain as a result of that. Feelings of anxiety generally start with a catalyst. That is, there's got to be something that starts it. Although most of the time you don't know what you're anxious about. It's fear that you can identify what you're afraid of. Usually environmental stimulus is what provokes stress. And various smells, sights, internal feelings can result in anxiety, as I said earlier, fear or aggression. And the amygdala becomes stimulated to react to the potential stress stimuli by preparing to either stand and fight or turn and run. This response triggers the other parts of the limbic system, the thalamus, the hypothalamus, to release that energy, hormones, glucocorticoids, adrenaline. It releases it to parts of the brain, it releases it to the bloodstream, it releases it to the rest of the body. When that occurs, then blood sugar rises. As the blood sugar rises, it feeds the muscles, because now you're in this I need to be prepared mode. Even if you don't know what's happening, the same responses are occurring. You need to be prepared. Why am I getting so anxious? Why am I uptight right now? Why am I feeling so uncomfortable? Why is my heart pounding, or my breath? Why do I feel like I have to take deeper breaths? What's happening? Why am I perspiring? So the blood sugar feeds the muscles to activate and to strengthen. And from the muscles, that energized blood recirculates through the body. And what do you think happens then? Well, little shaking, you get a little tremulous. I recall once I was driving my car, a car pulled out in front of me, and I had to hit the brakes really quick. And I just missed that car, just by inches. But it was so intense that I had gripped the steering wheel so tightly, it was a little hard to let it go. And I realized I was doing this. That's what happens when that flood of adrenaline goes through your system. I could say, yeah, it's because of just what happened. And in about 3 minutes, because it takes about 3 minutes for that adrenaline to get absorbed into the blood, to get watered down, so to speak. And then, okay, you've calmed down, you can move on again. Imagine that happening to someone that's not in a near accident, not in a threatening or dangerous situation, but all of a sudden that kicks in. And, now they start trembling as that blood is circulating, and it takes a little bit for them to calm down. Here's another view of the amygdala, a little better view, and you can see those orange areas there as the chart describes the amygdala, and the hippocampus that they're attached to, and how they are coordinating together in helping you to recognize those things that are fearful, emotional, and how to respond to those things. So the hippocampus is like the fire chief. It's a part of the brain that passes on the rest of that information to the rest of the brain. And it holds short-term memory. So the amygdala holds some bits of fearful memory, so does the hippocampus. And that short-term memory can transition into some longer-term memory, which the amygdala perhaps isn't able to do. So they team up, they work together. And an interesting part about the hippocampus is spatial memory. Oftentimes there are those who look at something, and they think that's only a couple of inches, but it's really 12 inches. Or they might say, about a half a mile, looks like, but it's really a mile. Well, that's actually a part of the hippocampus giving them some difficulty in spatial recognition, spatial memory. Some people are very adaptive to that. Some people aren't. It's just the way they're designed. It's just the way that hippocampus is designed. It doesn't mean that they are silly or stupid or anything else. It just means that's their perception because their brain is designed in a particular way. Everybody has a genius part of their brain, and everybody has weak areas in their brain. My weak area is back here where the math area is. I can't stand math. I don't like math, never did like math. I can do the basics in math, and when I was in college, you have to get through 2 semesters of math. And so I had to get tutoring. I had to get additional help with my math because it's the weak area of my brain. It's the basal left area is where your math center is in your brain. But I got through, and fortunately I'm in a field, in a career where math is not all that important. So there's genius parts of your brain, and we want to capitalize on those parts. Often we focus on our weaknesses and not enough on those genius parts of our brain. Also, the hippocampus has a lot to do with navigation. I know people who get lost going around the block. I know some who can't recognize, read a map. They're doing their best, but they look at the map and then they look at what is around them, and they have a lot of trouble with it. And basically, it's not their lack of experience, it's the fact that perhaps their hippocampus is not equipped as well as others might be in enabling them to navigate. And that's very important, especially when you're out of town in unfamiliar spaces. And by the way, let me back up on that for a moment. With anxiety, the greater the anxiety, the greater level of anxiety, it seems that these strengths of these various parts of the brain can be weakened. As a result, simple tasks can be very difficult. And when you look at what these parts of the brain specialize in, those simple tasks make it difficult when there's anxiety going on. And we're going to talk some more about that later. The hypothalamus and thalamus, we might call that the 911 operator. It's what sends that alert. It's what says, hey, you got to do something fast. And so it sends out the adrenaline, sends out the glucocorticoids to the body. So the hypothalamus controls various things: temperature, hunger. That explains oftentimes anxious people. Now, not all of them. Some don't get hungry, their stomachs close because their body is saying we need to send that energy elsewhere. And we'll be talking about that later as well. But other people, that's when they get hungry, because they feel they need more. The body's saying they need more energy. It's not enough. Parenting, the attachment, the bond in parenting, believe it or not, that maternal bonding comes from the hypothalamus. And look at that little area and how important that little area is. And when you get thirsty, or you get tired, or sleep, trouble sleeping, or sleeping too much is a factor from the hypothalamus. Your emotional activity, of course, your circadian rhythm, that rhythm through the day, that cycling that we all do, it synthesizes and secretes those neurohormones that are being released to help you to do so many things. The hypothalamus does so much that we need it. We have to have it, and we want it to be working well. But if that amygdala is overworking and it's not reducing itself, it's not cycling downward as it should, then it makes everything else overwork in the brain. Now, I can see we're running out of time, so we're going to stop here, and I'm going to continue with this next time. Keep all this in mind, because this is the basis of anxiety. This is the origins of where it's coming out of. And in understanding it, it helps us to think through when this process, this dynamic is going on, to be able to cycle it downward sooner than later. So I hope this was helpful. We're going to continue with this next time. God bless, and I hope you're able to pass this along to others who are having difficulties with anxiety, in helping them as well. So long.